An entitled jerk and his family make my life as a server a living nightmare, as he nitpicks and complains about everything in front of him, claiming that all of their food is wrong and that everything's cold. Things got so bad that this guy was practically chasing me around the restaurant as I was desperately trying to find a manager to resolve this issue, and I'm honestly still blown away by this guy's entitlement. Here's what happened. So I've been a server for several years here, and just when I thought I had seen it all, this happens to me. And before I begin, here's some necessary background that is important to me. First of all, I work in a high-end steakhouse with casual fine dining. Secondly, I'm a very small woman, and I'm very non-confrontational. Now, to begin this story, tonight I took a 14 top of trash. Literally, I'm talking the white tank top, the fake chain, the backwards hat and saggy pants, all being married to a Karen, with 5 older kids who were complete utter brats, and had kids of their own on the way who were also total brats, and then the grandparents, who could only whisper when ordering their food, but then could magically speak up to yell at you when they don't like something. Now, from the very start, they were awful. I knew from the beginning by how they were acting that I was putting gratuity on this table. They were nitpicking everything, such as them being upset that we had run out of tomatoes for their salad. I go to take their food order after I ask if they're ready, and after standing there for 2 minutes with the first person, after they said yes, I told them I'd be right back and went to take care of the other 5 tables. I then go back and they order, and there's no problems here so far. The food gets ready and I have to make 2 trips, and when I'm running the second batch of food out, this is where problems begin. I'm carrying a full tray of food, and the man in the tank top starts yelling at me. He says to me, "Take all the food back, it's cold. My skillet is ice cold." Now, I kindly explain the skillets aren't supposed to be hot, and for the record, they're not. It's only just for show, and they only get hot if we leave them in the window too long. Well, he gets even madder at my explanation. He says to me, "You may as well just take all the food back, it's all cold." Now, I remained polite the entire time. I said to him, "Well, let's let everybody else try their meals, and if they're cold, I can fix them." He then looks at me and says, "Are you calling me a liar?" Now, I didn't even have a second to respond before this guy starts popping off at me and demanding to speak to a manager. I just say okay after I drop off the last plates. I start walking across the restaurant towards the bar where my manager is, and Tank Top Man gets up and starts trotting after me. And I mean, this guy is right on my tail. I feel so angry and just so uncomfortable. Luckily, we have a server-side station room where customers aren't allowed, and I can use it to cut through to get my manager without him following me. I pop out the other side, and my manager isn't there. The guy sees me pop out on the other side and starts heading towards me again. And at this point, I'm freaking out. I'm practically jogging to the host, and I tell him that I need Linda or Joe right now. The host sees the guy, sees my state, and I think that he gets it. So we split off, and we're both frantically looking for either one. I managed to almost lose the guy when I find Linda, but he's only about 25 feet behind me. Words come pouring out of my mouth trying to explain quickly, but this guy comes stomping up, and he just pushes right past me in the direction of my table. He follows her, and she totally ignores him and whatever he's saying to her. I decide to stay many feet back, and I watch her deal with my messed up table from a distance. Now, I couldn't hear exactly what was said, but this is how it went from what she told me. She said that she just about punched one of them in the mouth, and it wasn't the tank top man who she got to calm down, but instead it was his mom that was popping off at her. And the other manager was going to finish off the table, but I would still get the gratuity, which was about 18%. In the end, only 1 steak got taken off, which they were very upset about, and I was instructed to stay out of their sight because apparently I had caused them such disdain. The manager takes over, and I don't have to deal with them any longer. And the funniest thing is that after they left, I was cleaning up their table, and I find a budgeting list with names, prices of things, how much they had to spend, and all this other stuff. I mean, these people had nothing left, and they were hoping for a free meal. But hey, I'm gonna keep that list, I'm not gonna lie. And I'm also tempted to look their names up on Facebook just so I can laugh at them once again. Wow, that sounds like an awful table to deal with. They were immediately confrontational, and I bet they acted that way just so they could get a free meal. Like, if you really think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like, this guy was literally chasing you around the restaurant. He was all over you when you're trying to find a manager to meet his stupid demands. That is really crazy behavior, and I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not wanting my stepbrother to come along with me to my birthday party that I was having exclusively with my dad? Because right now, my mom and stepdad are calling me a jerk for saying no, and at this point, I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 15-year-old male and my parents are divorced, and I have a stepbrother and 2 stepsisters. My stepbrother is 13 years old and my stepsisters are 10 and 9 years old. Last year, I chose to stay mostly with my dad and see my mom every other weekend versus the every other week schedule that we had before. I prefer living with my dad. My relationship with my mom isn't close, and I don't like her husband or his son, so it was a no-brainer who I would be with more once I was old enough to decide. My mom blames my dad. She blames him for everything wrong in our relationship and the relationship with her husband and stepson. Her blaming my dad for everything is kind of why our relationship ended up this way. When I was younger and they were still married, she chose to stay away from school plays and stuff like that, especially if dad was taking time off work to be there, because she didn't want to be there with him because their marriage sucked. And when I asked her to come, she would tell me it was a choice between her and my dad. My parents fought about that too, and my dad called her childish and told her to put me first. It was easier when they divorced because they fought way less. Now, my mom isn't that warm either. She's fine, but not really the kind of parent you could seek comfort from. She has a really short temper and she dated a lot after she and my dad filed for divorce. And she introduced me to a bunch of random guys and tried to make me like them more than my own dad. When she got married to her husband, she made a big deal out of me needing to spend time with his kids and putting the expectation on me to give her time with her husband. Then her stepson wanted to come with me to my dad's place, and he was really trying to be my brother and would honestly get so annoying. Then my mom would annoy me because she said I should include him more. Her husband would get mad at me and say I should stay with them more since his son wanted a brother, and he told me his son could come with me to my dad on some weekends, especially if I insisted on seeing my dad. It was extra awful when my dad would take me on vacations and my stepbrother would beg to go with us and I would just say no. My mom would tell me to ask my dad and I would say no as well. She'd tell me that I was a brother whether I wanted to be or not, and I would include my sibling who wanted to go. I told her she can pay for a vacation between all of us, but I wasn't letting her stepson intrude when I was with my dad. My birthdays were always a nightmare too, because I had 2 birthdays and dad always did something fun with me and my friends. And this year is no exception, and he's taking us someplace really awesome. But it's a place my stepbrother has wanted to go for years, and when my dad gave my mom a heads up about it, as he has to do that when he takes me out of state, just like she has to do, she told her stepson and now he wants to come along. But here's the thing, I really don't want him there. My mom told me to not be a jerk, stating that they can't afford to take the family there. But I told her it wasn't my problem. Her stepson even tracked me down at school and begged me to go, but I told him no. My mom and her husband told me that I was being a jerk for doing this. So honestly, am I in the wrong in this situation? Because right now I'm really frustrated and I seriously don't know what to do. No, I don't think you're the jerk at all. I think you're just trying to spend time with your dad and enjoy some semblance of privacy away from your obnoxious stepbrother. Like, why on earth would your dad even want your stepbrother to come with you? Like, if I was the dad in this scenario, I would want to have just my son with me so we can have a good time for their birthday. I wouldn't want this other kid with me that I don't know and have no claim to. And it's pretty clear that the stepbrother is being obnoxious. So the fact that your mom and your stepdad are just turning a blind eye to that, in my opinion, is so uncalled for. So no, you are not the jerk. You get 2 birthdays and you're spending this one with your dad. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter where you're going. If you don't want your stepbrother with you, then honestly, that is the end of the discussion. My wife's entitled aunt demands that we move out of my mother-in-law's house, claiming that we haven't earned that house and that my mother-in-law would do better just to sell it and keep the money. And despite the fact that we invested years into fixing up and cleaning up this house, me and my wife are left incredibly angry and very infuriated. And at this point, we seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So for a little bit of background, my in-laws divorced the same time my wife and I got married. They were not rich, but owned a company and were well off. Their house was a small rambler on an acre of land in a pretty nice area. When they split, my mother-in-law got the house. She ended up falling into a slump of online buying and turned the house into a hoarder situation. Come 2 years later, and she had a massive massive stroke and needs to have living assistance. My wife and I spend a full year of all our free time cleaning up the house and property. We even fill an industrial dumpster with garbage and hold multiple estate sales. We went through the usual arguments, where she would not want us to sell any of her china because it was her favorite piece, or she didn't want us to sell her stuff without her permission, since she claimed some of her stuff was worth thousands of dollars possibly. Now, after selling nearly everything she had, most of which she didn't even know she had, we only ended up with about $10,000. And this all went towards her medical bills, since of course she didn't think she needed insurance prior to the stroke, because according to her, insurance is a scam. Well, the house is actually pretty nice. We pay out of pocket ourselves to finish the remodel she started a decade ago and realize that we really like it. We are in our early 30s, and even with no kids, we have no shot we can afford a house this nice on this much land anytime soon. The market says the house is worth $850,000, and my mother-in-law wants to sell it, but it's completely paid off. My wife convinced her to let us rent to own from her and change the will so we could get it in the end, and we would just have to buy my wife's sister out of whatever's left on the cost. And honestly, that's a good deal in my opinion. Well, fast forward 2 years and we call this house our own. We take care of it, we work on it, we literally do everything. The yard and house look nicer than they have in 20 years. My mother-in-law is slowly recovering from her stroke, but she still can't walk or do much on her own, and yet even still, her sister appears. She is insisting my mother-in-law evict us and sell the house, that she should use the money to live somewhere nicer. Apparently, her reasoning is that we didn't earn a house that nice and that we're just squatting in her house. She also said that she's getting better, so she might want to live there again, or could at least use the money. Now, this is a 2,000 square foot rambler, and we are paying $2,000 a month towards the house and essentially her medical bills. And we are taking care of her every single week. And yet this entitled aunt's first thought is to evict us and take it back for their own gain. And it's honestly all so infuriating. Yeah, your aunt is completely out of line. What is she talking about? You guys didn't earn a house. You absolutely earned that house. You paid for everything. You fixed it up for what, 2 years? And you're literally taking care of it every single day. Like, in my opinion, you absolutely earned that house. Also, what has this aunt done to help out her sister? Like, she has very clearly been sitting on the sidelines watching all this go down, and only once this house is like up to standards and has some kind of like relevance again, is she like, oh yeah, you should sell it and evict them. They haven't earned any of this. But in reality, she hasn't earned any of this. She's sitting there trying to be like, oh yeah, they don't deserve this. But like, what have you done for the house? All of this just sounds really infuriating, and I completely understand where you're coming from, because your wife's aunt sounds like an absolute piece of garbage. And in my opinion, she does not deserve anything she's trying to claim. My entitled parents have treated me poorly my entire life, never showing me any kind of love, appreciation, or credit for the things that I do. And now that I have a family of my own, I'm making a promise to never treat my kids the way that my mom treated me growing up, because honestly, it is all just so disappointing. Here's what happened. So I'm a 39-year-old female, and I am one of 3 kids, and have been treated poorly my entire life by my awful parents. One of my siblings is treated so differently than the other 2 that it's almost a joke when the phone rings when I'm there and my sibling is calling. If I call my mom, you can tell that she's typically doing something while talking to me, and I might get 5 minutes with her. But if I happen to be at her house and the sibling calls, everything stops. Her voice inflection changes, and you would think the most important person in the world called. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm right here, mom. It's been like this my whole life. I paid my way through college and even had to pay back a loan to the very last cent for some things that I couldn't afford for my wedding. In contrast, my sibling not only had a fully paid for wedding ceremony at a posh venue, but also had a completely separate lavish reception months later that I'm sure cost in the upper tens of thousands of dollars. I've never been given any credit for being the first to graduate college in my family, being financially independent, raising a great family, or just generally being a decent member of society. My sibling is completely codependent, and if something happens, my mom will drop everything and go tend to them, even though they are married and should be able to provide for themselves. Every year they put on a big event for the family, and I happen to be there and just mention how tired and busy I've been because I put in 10 to 12-hour days working and raising multiple children. Most days my parents never leave the house, watching 24/7 cable news and scrolling social media, and all I get from them is a scoff as they say, "You're tired? We do so much more than you." I mean, it's almost comical at this point. Fortunately, my husband and I are very aware of the tendencies that we see, and we are open with our children about how we will never be that way, and they have every right to call us even if we are. before. I just thought I was unlucky. I had no idea this was a generational issue. The best part is that they always talk about how wonderful the good old days were. And I'm like, why don't you get out there and make some new memories? But you know what? Whatever. Because at least now I know what I don't want to be in 20 years. Wow, that really sucks for the original poster. I'm so sorry that they clearly have chosen favorites, and it seems like nothing you ever do is going to be good enough for these people. But I think the one silver lining here that I think you can hopefully hold on to is the fact that you recognize exactly the way they're treating you, and you know firsthand that what they're doing is very wrong. So hopefully you can be a better mom than your mom has ever been to you, because from the sounds of it, it doesn't seem like she was very attentive in the slightest. Am I the jerk for returning gifts my family gave to my newborn daughter after they said they hate my daughter's name, and that because I broke a family tradition, they will never accept my daughter? Here's what happened. Okay, so I'm a 26-year-old female, and I gave birth to my first child 3 weeks ago. And trust me, my family is not happy with the name I chose for my daughter. My parents and siblings had wanted me to name my daughter Agatha or Agnes because those are family names, and it's part of a theme that my family keeps, where the oldest girl and the youngest girl pass the initials of their name to their children, and because my name also begins with an A, they wanted me to do this as the youngest. My oldest sister followed the tradition, my mother's oldest and youngest sisters did it, my cousins even did it, but my husband and I did not want to follow the tradition, and we didn't want a classic name for our baby anyways. We chose the name Indy for our daughter, and I had told my family during my pregnancy that I was not using the name Agatha or Agnes or any name starting with the letter A for my baby. In fact, I told them that more than once, but for some reason they decided that Agatha would be the name. When my daughter was born and my family came to visit us at the hospital, they were all shocked by the name that we chose. They asked me what I was thinking going for a name like that, and then told me I had broken the tradition for some weird name that doesn't make sense. My husband asked them to leave the hospital if they couldn't keep their opinions to themselves. They eventually apologized, which I believed was sincere, and they came to our house with gifts. But when I saw the gifts, I noticed anything personalized had the name Agatha on it. And when I asked about it, they told me Agatha was a much better name. And surely I didn't want my daughter to have a dumb modern name like Indy. My mom told me she could not understand me picking such a hideous name, and she said my husband and most of my friends had set bad examples with their names, but I should stick to classics because they are classic for a reason. She told me they would never be able to accept the name Indy in the family. Well, I returned all the gifts to their packaging, and I returned them to my family before asking them to leave. I told them they did not get to insult my daughter's name again and push so hard for us to change the name that we as parents had decided on. My recovery from surgery has been slow, so my husband was the one to make sure they actually left, but they were upset that I was responding to them like I was. They told me I should have been more honest about the name earlier, and I was punishing them for thinking more of my daughter than my husband and I were. Now, I do feel bad for returning the gifts and kicking them out, and the number of text messages that they have sent me since then basically tell me that they didn't like it either. So I'm honestly wondering if I'm the jerk, because at this point, I really don't know what to do. Okay, I want to say first and foremost that I think family traditions like this are really dumb. Like seriously, just let people name their kids whatever they want. It is so dumb when families do stuff like this, where they freak out just because you picked a different name for your child. And for them to double down and be like, we won't accept the name that you gave your child. Like, what is wrong with these people? That is so insulting. And you know what? If I was in your situation like right now, and they said that to me and gave me gifts with the name Agatha on it, I would have done the same thing that you did. I would have taken the gifts and given it right back to them. Like, there's no way you're gonna come into my house and act like that. So no, you're definitely not the jerk. And if they don't like the fact that you stood up for yourself, then that's something that they have to deal with, not you. My entitled manager freaks out on me when she sees me sitting down at the cash register, stating that if I refuse to work, then I should just sit at the register and she would do everything. So I decided to maliciously comply by proving to her how ridiculous she was being in this moment. Here's what happened. Okay, so I work part-time in a small convenience store, and it's just me and the boss lady. I'm usually there so she can do paperwork in the back and order supplies, so while I'm on the cash register, I have to keep everything in front stocked up, keep the returned drink bottles and cans neatly organized, etc. It is honestly pretty steadily busy. Well, every now and then, she likes to freak out and start complaining about something, and yesterday she came out to find me sitting at the cash register. I had just made sure everything was completely restocked. I had been regularly running into the back and grabbing things and refilling stuff, but she chose to freak out and accuse me of not doing any work. And since I apparently didn't want to work, I should just sit there at the register and she would do everything. Now, at first, I thought she was joking, and I laughed as I got up to do something, but she suddenly got really mean and got in my face and said to just sit down and she would do everything. So you know what? That's exactly what I did. I started telling her everything I was about to do, and she actually just started doing it. I was just sitting at the register and smiling. So she looked at me and said, "Oh, it must be nice to sit there at the register and not have to do anything." So I happily said back to her, "You bet it is. Thank you so much." And in the end, she just glared at me as she went back to her office. Wow, that job sounds like it sucks. This lady clearly was looking for someone to blame about something, and you just happen to be the one person she can pick on at the moment. And it's so ironic that she came around right after you got done doing something else in the store. Like you weren't just sitting there doing nothing. You were out working. You were getting stuff done, getting things restocked. And I know when I've worked like customer service and I've had managers similar to the one you've dealt with, they always show up right when you're about to sit down and then try to act like, "Oh, you haven't done anything today. Everything looks so neat and clean." And you want to say, "Yeah, well, everything's in order because of me." So I personally find this malicious compliance hilarious. And honestly, if I was in your shoes, I would do the same thing. But I also would definitely be looking for another job because this lady sounds like she is miserable to work for. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.